This lecture is all about gestures. To me, gestures is probably the thing that separates Mac from other computers, in my opinion. Gestures provide a way to create a streamlined workflow from a navigational perspective in the operating system. I find that Mac really nailed it when it comes to an intuitive way to navigate the operating system and create a workspace that allows you to be really creative but also efficient. Let's jump in and take a look at this laptop, and I'll show you how you can configure gestures to work for you the way that you see fit. From here, the first place we want to go to is System Preferences, and we're going to click Trackpad.
I want to talk to you about a change that came about in the Ventura version of macOS. There was a pretty significant change in that System Preferences became System Settings. So when I open this, it now looks a lot more like you would expect to see on an Apple iOS device, like an iPhone, for example. Under General, you can see that I've got tabs like find out about the computer, and I can use the software update feature to stay up to date on bug fixes and releases and that type of thing. And if I come over here to Desktop and Dock, that's where you're going to see a lot of those settings where you can adjust where the dock lives and different features that dictate the behavior of the dock. It's less visual than the System Preferences look and feel was. It's just a little bit different in terms of the way it's laid out, but all the same features are still here. So like if I go down to mouse, that's where I would be able to control gestures and settings like that. Because I'm on a traditional mouse, I don't see those same settings, but if I pop over to this knowledge article, you'll see that this article in particular talks about how to right-click on a Mac, and that's a Windows term. Mac calls it secondary click, so like an alternate click. So if I left-click and drag over this, I can highlight text, for example, but if I right-click or alternate click, secondary click, in other words, I get this sub-menu. So now I can look up, Control-click, I can search Google for that term, I can open it in reading mode, and so forth. And you can see on this image here that if I had a magic mouse, and if I were to click the top right portion of the magic mouse, it would perform that secondary click behavior. And you can change that setting as well. So from the drop down here, you can choose a different setting to get that behavior to appear. So if I scroll down and I look at Trackpad, you'll see that this is by default set to that 2-finger click. And again, if I want to change that behavior, I can click the selection here in the secondary click menu item. So this gives you an idea of how you can control things in system settings. This article is great because you can drill into, what all the different settings mean. So it tells you like quiet click. If you don't want your trackpad to make a sound, you click it, you could turn that on or off. I'll include a link to this knowledge article. And if you have any questions, I encourage you to explore it. But really, I just wanted to call out that system settings is different than system preferences, starting with the Ventura version of macOS. So any modern version you have now is going to look more like what you see on my screen right now. And, one big call out for Sequoia, for example, is the introduction of Apple Intelligence. So this is where you can configure Siri, you can turn on ChatGPT and then dictate how that behaves. And I encourage you to read the Apple Intelligence and Privacy document because this talks more about how the Apple Intelligence operates. And if you wanted to read more about the ChatGPT version, you can read the OpenAI terms of use. And in there, there's an option to opt out of data collection, for example. If you don't want what you put into the AI chat feature to be used to train the AI models, for example, this is how you can opt out of that stuff if you so choose. All right, thank you so much for watching.
If you notice the way that I'm tapping, I can just touch very lightly on the trackpad and I can get the computer to respond. So I'm not pressing really hard on the trackpad, I'm just tapping it once. This option right here called tap to click is how I'm able to do that. So if I uncheck that, you'll notice that if I tap something lightly, nothing happens. I can tap this all I want. I have to really press down on the trackpad to get the mouse to engage. So if I come back here to point and click and I enable tap to click, now I can just softly touch the trackpad and I get the mouse to engage. That's the first thing that I like to enable when I consider the most common gestures that I like to use. This one is fun. You can look up information by hitting 3 fingers. Because I have the tap to click enabled, I can just tap with 3 fingers very lightly and then pull up information like dictionary and thesaurus information. The secondary click is essentially that right click option. So you can see on the trackpad video that a person has 2 fingers and they're just tapping. I like to use my middle and ring finger, and here's what it looks like. So if I tap with 2 fingers, I get a submenu. And that's the same as if I were to right click on Windows. So I can do all kinds of stuff from this menu right off the desktop. Over here on scroll and zoom, I tend to turn all of these on. This has a lot to do with like the Safari browser and the way that you can move through pages, but this also works in Google Chrome and other applications like Slack. So if I pull Slack up, you can see that I can scroll up and down. So that's what that behavior is to me. You know, you can, and even if it's open in the background, I can still scroll up and down on the app in the background just because I'm hovering over it. So that's a really fun one. Zoom in and out is fun. Like if you have a phone, you can zoom in on images. So that's what zoom in and out does. It allows you to really zoom in on stuff like an image. It's not going to work on this particular application, and that's normal. Rotate is fun. You can change an image with your hand. Right here under more gestures, this is where you'll find the more efficiency type gestures like swipe between full screen apps. So what does that mean? I'm going to go over here to Slack and I'm going to make that full screen by clicking the green button here in my top row. So see how I get that full screen option? I'll go ahead and click that. And maybe this has happened to you when you're on a Zoom and you go to join a meeting and the window maximizes and then all of a sudden you don't know where your other applications are. So what's happening is your Zoom application is opening in full screen mode. So if that happens to you and you have this particular gesture enabled, what you can do now is swipe between full screen applications. So you see how I have 4 fingers selected for the behavior. So you can change it to 3 fingers. I like to use 4 fingers because that ties into some of the other gestures that I prefer. So you can play around with that and do what makes sense for you. But just going back and forth allows me to go between my full screen applications. You'll also notice that to the right of that, I've got another desktop area. So let's go back to our gesture window here. So mission control, I love a lot because not only can I see what's happening if I have a bunch of applications open, it also opens this desktop area view. So you can see that I have several desktops open, and with that, I can move things around. So I'm going to go to my Slack desktop and I will take that out of full screen. If I wanted to have Slack in its very own dedicated desktop, one thing I could do is take my 4 fingers, make kind of a rake with my fingertips, and press forward with all 4 of those. So I get the mission control view to come up. I can drag Slack into its own desktop. You could do the same with Google Chrome or some other application you're working on. And now I can just scroll between desktops. So there's my Slack desktop, and then I can go to this desktop and do something else, like open Zoom, for example, or do whatever I want on this desktop, and then just scroll between the desktops. App Expose is a lot of fun. So let's open Google Chrome, and the first thing you'll see is I have a bunch of profiles. I can open another profile. I'll alternate click to get to that menu. So like if this was Windows, it would be right clicking, but I'm just going to use 2 fingers and alternate click to open another Google Chrome profile. And this time I'm going to open my Udemy profile, which I'm not currently logged into. So now I have 2 instances of Google Chrome open. That app expose is really fun because if I pull down with 4 fingers I can see the two instances of Google Chrome open. And this would be really handy if I had like 5 documents open, and I want to try to get between those. I can use the app expose to display all of the instances of that particular application. All right. There's one other way to go about this. So you can see right now that I've got a menu above the keys. And right now, what I can do is adjust the brightness on the screen so I can make the screen brighter or less bright. And if I close that, I have my volume button so I can raise and lower the volume. And then to the left of that, there's that little caret icon. And when I click it, it opens the full keyboard view. So this button right here is my mission control button. So just like I can scroll up with 4 fingers and see my desktops, the open applications I have, and if I hover over the desktops, I can see what's open within the desktop. I can do that same thing by pressing the mission control button there, which is kind of cool. The button next to it allows you to see all of your applications very quickly. So if you wanted to open an application and you didn't want to go to Finder, click Applications, find your application, or locate it down here in the bottom, Dock, you can use that shortcut key. So see right now I've got the caret icon. If I press that, I can open my applications this way. And then using 2 fingers, I can scroll between all of my applications with this great big visual icon view. If I don't want to see it anymore, I just hit escape and it goes away. So getting back to the gestures, you see how you can manipulate this to work well for you. So show desktop, that one's fun. So if you take your fingers and you just open them up like a flower blossoming, and then now I can see my desktop. If I wanted to see what was behind all of my applications on my desktop, this is how you could do that. I see a lot of folks creating folders on their desktop. And if you're a person who does that, then this would be a way to get to your desktop very quickly. And then you do that same gesture where you draw your fingers in to get everything to come back. So that's a brief overview of gestures and how you can configure those. I'm a really big fan of having this type of thing open where you can scroll between the desktops. And in the next video, I'll open a document and ask you to follow along with me so that you can practice getting the most out of the desktops. That lecture assumes that you have these features enabled. So if you don't have those turned on and you want to try the lecture out, go ahead and enable those gestures just for the lecture for practice, and we can do that together. It'll be fun. All right, I'll see you in the next video.